November 29th, 2005, at the home of Ray and Jean Huber, 11560 Old Gate Road, Springdale, Ohio, a suburb of Cincinnati. My name is Margaret Lostrow, and I am a member of the National New Deal Preservation Association. I will be interviewing Ray Huber about his experiences in life in the Merchant Marines during World War II in Korea. Mr. Huber, Ray, or sometimes called Boots, I would like for you now to start the interview about what we've been discussing, about your experiences before and in the Merchant Marines, to share with the Library of Congress and a little bit of history. Would you like to start now?
Well, the draft was starting, and I didn't want to go into the Army at that time. So at that...
Why didn't you want to go into the...
Well, I knew what it was like because I had been in the 3 Seas before, and I didn't want to be down in that mud any more than what I was then. So we went down, and I was thinking of joining the Air Force because I'm small, and I had some experience with guns. And I thought I could get in the Air Force and be a gunner or something like that. So I got up there, and the guy said, "You're just what we want. And here you are. Just sign this paper, and we'll be ready to go." And when I looked at it, it just said U.S. Army. And I says, "What's this?" "I want the Air Force." And he says, "You got to sign up into the Army, and then they put you over into the Air Force, or they'll transfer you." I says, "No, I've worked for the government before, and I don't trust them to put me in to the Air Force. I know where I'm going to wind up." So I let that go, and while we were in there trying to sign up for that, a guy that was recruiting for the Merchant Marine was there, and he come in and tried to get us to come over there. So we went over to that side, and he talked me into signing up with the Merchant Marine. And the next day we left, we went to Baltimore, and there's a training ship there, the city of Chattanooga. And I spent, I don't know how many months on that. I think it was up into 42 in the wintertime. And then they had a ship available. They needed somebody down in Norfolk. And actually, we went from Norfolk down to Wilmington and picked up this Greek ship in the middle of the night and took off, and didn't, to this day, I don't know the name of it. I couldn't pronounce it, I guess, if I hit it, or anybody else. And while we were out in the early morning hours going towards Norfolk, the ship was shelled by a submarine, which hit several times, and we abandoned ship. There was 2 lifeboats. We left and sitting out there, and within a couple of hours, the Coast Guard come, picked us up, and finished taking us into Norfolk. And that's when they put us in a barracks with a bunch of wax on one end and us on the other end, which sounds real good, but it didn't turn out that way. You know? So from there, I went back to Baltimore, and there they sent us up to Sheepshead Bay in New York Harbor, and they said you can finish your training up here. So we were up there for I don't know how long, and then from there we went to Hoffman Island out in the harbor, finished more training out there. And now this was supposed to be like cadet training and stuff like that. From there, they sent us down to Iowa. 2 or 3 of us went to Wilmington again. It was either Wilmington or Charleston. I can't remember what it was. And we picked up the Woodrow Wilson. It was a brand new Liberty ship. And we went from there over to North Africa, and that was just when things were getting started over there. No, first we went to England, made a trip back, and then went to North Africa right after the invasion of North Africa. And from there come back, I think 2 or 3 trips back and forth. From there back to New York again. And I signed on for another ship, and they sent us to Norfolk, and I picked up the sea train Lakehurst, was just being turned over from the Navy over to the Merchant Marine, because what they were doing, the Navy wasn't really equipped to do. It was more civilian work by carrying large equipment and stuff like that, and there was no sense in having 300 to 500 men on a ship when they could put us on. There were 36 of us. Took the same thing. After it was outfitted, then we made trips from New York embarkation to England, and for several years. And that went on until the invasion of Normandy.
What were you carrying in these trips?
Locomotives, boxcars, big heavy rolling equipment that wouldn't fit on any other ship. This was made for just that type of work. To carry, that's what the sea trains did in peacetime, was go from New Jersey to Havana to Texas City and back again, hauling. And what it was, it made up a whole train. Instead of sending it overland, they just carried it up on a ship. And we carried all this heavy equipment over. And then during the invasion of Normandy, we couldn't make it close enough to shore over there to put these heavy equipment, tanks, ammo carriers and stuff like that. So we had to wait until they secured a dock for us to go to. And while we were waiting over in Southampton to be able to get in, a friend of mine who was assistant to the port captain asked me if I would go with them and help man one of the small ships that were towing those big caissons over that they made docks out of later on the beach of Normandy. So I said yes, and went with him and this Englishman. And this was more of a little boat, a harbor tug, like, very old. And all it had was a captain, an engineer, and 2 deckhands. And we got out about maybe 20 miles or so. And something happened. What it was, I never did find out. If we hit a mine, if the old boat blew up, or what happened. Anyhow, I found myself in the water. And me and this English guy, and we never did see where the other ones went. It was dark. In the morning, this messenger boat that they were using to run from Normandy over to the headquarters, I guess, in Southampton and those other English ports, spotted us, picked us up, and took us to a hospital. And I was there. They said I had a broken back, and I didn't. I couldn't move my lower extremities, so they put me in the hospital. Next morning, I woke up. I had to go to the latrine, And I just got up out of bed and walked over and went to the, and when I come back, a nurse grabbed me and says, "What are you doing? You got a broken back. You can't do that," you know. So I found out then that I didn't have a broken back. So what they figured was that it was just the shock of the cold water and the fatigue, and that did it. After sleeping all night, getting warm, then I was all right. So they sent me back down to my ship again. We went from there to Cherbourg, France, and by that time we anchored outside there and waited for the army to come down and liberate Cherbourg. The Army engineers went in and made docks and railroad tracks so we could put our stuff onto it, you know. And we waited there, and you had to stay away from it because the Germans still occupied these little forts at the end of the key areas. When you go into Cherbourg Harbor, you got a big rough breakwater in front, all made, handmade out of stone. And in there, the Germans were still in it. They didn't come out and get them because it wasn't worth it. Let them starve yourself out. So when we would go past there, these Germans would shoot at us with small arms. And when we come through, everybody had to get off deck so we could get in there and get around into the harbor. And when we got in there, a sister ship, the Texas, tried to unload these big locomotives, and in doing so, the boom got away from them, and the whole thing went over the side, tore down the king post, the boom, the purchase box, everything went into the water. So we had to sit out there and wait while a Norwegian ship come along with a 200-ton boom on it to be able to pick it up and clear it and get that cleared out. After they got that done, we went into the dock, and then I reached over and picked up all the equipment they had in their ship, put it on my ship, changed the boom setup, and then picked it up and put it over on the dock. So we unloaded that whole ship plus my ship. And that was still while the fighting was still going on just up above Cherbourg, up in the hills up there. In the meantime, the Army engineers and the railroad division was putting in a railroad yard up above there so we could well, we unloaded all this heavy equipment, all this rolling stock, tankers, boxcars, food and everything in them, and locomotives. They had a place to go to so they could be dispensed then to the rest of wherever they were going. We made that after we got that done and got the Texas cleaned up and sent back to England where they re-outfitted her. We come back and then we made trips in from Liverpool, Cardiff, Wales, Newport, Wales, and I don't know what all else, right in that area, all back again, back and forth across there for, I guess, almost 6 months. We were back and forth, carried all that equipment back and forth on that. And in the meantime, before that, we was pulled into England and into Cardiff or Newport, and on the way back you had to pull back out and go back through the Irish Sea and come out through Scotland and Iceland, and that's when the German bombers would come over and bomb you coming and going back and forth on that. We picked up troops. After that, and took them to Ireland for extra training, and then they made landings over in Normandy. Actually, they did that before we made the landings, and before we unloaded all the boxcars and stuff like that. Could you turn that off now?
Wait a minute. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, what I left out, I got way ahead of myself. And before that, we were running Liberty ships to England in convoys. And for, I guess, a good year or so before that. And to do that, you, all in a convoy, usually 64 ships to a convoy. You're making 9 knots an hour in this thing, and any submarine could pick you up and know exactly where you were. In fact, we used to listen to the radio, and that Lord Haw Haw used to be on. Sometime when we would leave the harbor up in New York, he would say, name the ships that were leaving, where we were going, and when we were going to arrive. They already knew the whole setup of the whole thing. So how are you going to get away from them, you know? So you had a convoy, you had these escort carriers, destroyers, destroyer escorts that helped take you across. We had the Navy Armed Guard on board for air attacks, stuff like that. When we got too close to England, then we would run into the German bombers and strafers and stuff like. And you had to come in and go. You had to get below Iceland, but go around and come around Ireland and go down the Irish Sea to get to where you were going. It was either Liverpool, Blackpool, down into Wales, Cardiff, Wales, Newport, Wales, and unload, and then stand by and get together again, go back up the same way, and then maneuver around until you had a convoy going back again, and then go back to New York and pick up another load, or wherever you were going to pick up the load. And you did that over and over again, you know. We lost a lot of ships to submarines, air attacks, and the whole works. I know we used to come back with a lot less ships than what we took over, yeah. And we had so much equipment on there that we used to say that England was going to sink just under all the equipment that was brought in and unloaded, you know. I guess for 3 years we hauled nothing but stuff over to England, you know. And then we'd pick up troops and haul them from one point to another over in England. Or by that time we're down in North Africa, and we go down there and bring troops down there and bring wounded back or prisoners. And then before the invasion of Normandy, we took troops from England over to Ireland into a big area they had up there, and they trained then for making the landings over on the beaches in Normandy. And we taught them how to get in and out of the assault boats and coming up and down the nettings and ratlines to get yourself into the boat and get back out of the boat, you know. And then in the meantime, we were practicing taking heavy loads and seeing how far out we could reach with like a 50-ton load and reach out, and I had to bring it out 50 feet, 50 tons, 50 feet. It was all right for the first one or two engines or tanks. But after that, then the ship got too light, and it just rolled over. Every time you'd take a load over, it rolled over with you. So we figured it out that it wouldn't be no good. You had to have a dock to put them on, or you couldn't do it just out unloading them out out into the water, you know. So that's how we waited to unload them in Cherbourg. So we made that trip over there, like I said, I guess for 6 months, back and forth from Cardiff, Wales to Cherbourg with all this rolling equipment, big guns, tanks, locomotives, everything. And everything was loaded. When we picked up something and took it over there, you could drive it right off of the dock and right into combat, you know, if it was necessary. After that, come back and we went to North Africa. We'd be all over. By the time they were just secure in North Africa, the British were. And we took more troops and tanks into Iran, Algeria, for Patton when he was starting to come in. And Montgomery was coming up to El Alamein and getting that out. We were up there at that time. At that time, then you still had the Italian was still in it, and they had these fast torpedo boats. And they would try to get you in the harbor because there was not enough places to tie up. You had to anchor out. So you were a sitting duck to these torpedo boats, German and Italian. And they sunk quite a few of them. And this one in particular they had this troop ship that we were with pulled into this dock, and it was pulling in. This torpedo boat come up at it, and this destroyer come in front of it and got itself between the torpedo boat and this transport, a big transport. And it got it in the stern and blew the whole ass end off of the stern of that destroyer, which was a pretty brave thing to do, you know.
All right.
And took off. So that was quite a thing. And after that, we went into Tripoli, picked up German prisoners and Italian prisoners, took them back to England. And then they made the landings in Sicily and southern Italy. Now, we supplied guns and boats over into Sicily, but that's as far as I got there during the war. And then we were back into England again. And I think it was about that time then that we took off and went through the canal and over to the Pacific side. And we touched at Iwo Jima for quite a while, and then went to Ulithi group where they were forming convoys and getting ready for the attack on Okinawa. And we went with them on that, and we had what we were carrying on that, instead of locomotives and boxcars and that, was tractor trailers, big tractor trailers, and they were self-contained washing outfits, you know, complete laundry or kitchen outfit, and repair, you know, complete repair shops and stuff like that. We sat in Ulithi for 45 days, no food, or anything. All we had on that ship was 10 tons of ground beef, was it, nothing else. Then they come along and unloaded a whole bunch of cheap vegetables in cans, green beans and mixed vegetables. And I'll tell you, I don't know who made them, but they were just trying to get rid of them. You know, they were they were terrible. You couldn't eat them, you know. But the troops that we had on, we were taking, they used to be allowed to go ashore in this island they called Mog, and that was a recreation island. Well, all the time we were there, we didn't get off of the ship once, but the troops all got off alternate days off over there. They come back, had beer and everything else. We never had a beer or didn't have nothing the whole time we were there. Yeah. So they had asked us to go ashore one day and pick up the mail. And while we were over there, we ate the whole bunch of them out. Why can't we get something, you know? Well, they say, well, why aren't you? Come on in, you could bring your men over. And he says, what ship are you on? And we told him, he says, oh, that's Merchant Marine. And he says, sorry, you're not allowed to land. So we didn't get on there. But on the way back out, coming down the dock, they had a bunch of old K rations. Now that was the first rations that the Army had, coming in this blue box right here.
Oh, is that right?
Looked like that.
Uh-huh.
And they had like a bar of candy that you couldn't bite, and 2 little cans of stuff like dog food, and maybe a dessert, a pack of cigarettes, half a pack of cigarettes, and I can't remember now what else was in it. But I stole a whole boatload of that while they were waiting to get the mail. I was sewing these things down in the bottom of this lodge that we had that we were coming back. I figured out I stole damn near a ton of those lies. Took it back to the ship, and we ate those things when we couldn't eat no more ground beef. So they come back, and that was it. We went from there. We dropped off some troops at someplace outside of Okinawa, and sat there for a while. And that's when Ernie Powell got killed out there on that island. We dropped troops off there and picked troops up from there, and then went into Naha Harbor in Okinawa. But by that time, it was pretty well secured. That we were there just unloading onto a lighter, and they had to come out, pick it up, and pick up 2 or 3 of these big truck trailers, and take them in, and then come back. And we did that, I guess, for over a week. And I was on the last trailer, and didn't have enough room on that little launch when the hurricane was just outside of Naha. And they told us then, you can't leave because you're too close in. You can't get secured before the hurricane hits. So I laid that big trailer down over top of the other trailers, and this poor Navy guy, I had him tied up with a cable and he couldn't let go. So after I laid that trailer down, I said, go ahead, I don't give a damn what you do with it now, but we had to get out of here. So we turned him loose, and I could watch him going ashore, and he run that thing up onto the beach and jumped out. I see. After that, we secured our hatches, got it all ready to go, and started pulling out of the harbor. And the Navy says you weren't allowed to leave. You can't leave. If you leave, we'll send a ship after you. And our ship, if you remember, was already manned by the the Navy, and we had guns up that no other merchant ship had on that thing. So the old man wired back and says, "You better send a good one because I think we got you outgunned." So we took off and went. But we did get into a convoy with them out there. And I mean, it was one of the worst hurricanes that ever hit the area right there. And this guy, the captain that I had was an old Swede, and he was good. He was Christian C. Christensen was his name. And his mate was a Swede, and they do sailing. They had sailed for years and years, you know. So when we pulled out, he went north all the way up, and they were going to try to go up that way and get out of it. And the captain said, "You can't get out of it going in this direction. You got to go to the side to get out of it." At the time, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about, but I remember being on the bridge and we were talking, the mate, and the old helmsman we had on there, he says, "I can't hold it no more because we had a rounded bottom." I showed you those pictures where it was just nothing but an open tank, actually.
Right.
And he says, "We can't keep it no more. We can't. If this storm gets any bigger, I'll lose it. You know, I won't be able to hole into it." So the captain radioed him that we were pulling out. So anyhow, on this hurricane, within 4 hours we were getting out of it. And within 6 or 8 hours we were in clear water. And we went from there to Guam and picked up water and provisions. And we were still anchored out. To get water out there, you had to hook up to a water buoy, and they pumped water into your ship from there. You were maybe 2 miles out from shore. And they sent a ship out to drop off fresh provisions to these other ships. And when he come up to us, I was working on the big boom, and I dropped this big boom down, and he says, "That's all you get." And I think it was like a crate of oranges and something like that, and he was going out to the Navy ships. Well, when he did that, 2 guys dropped down on it, hooked up that thing, and I picked up the barge and all and brought it up onto my ship. I could pick up 200 tons with it. So I picked it up, we unloaded what we wanted, put it back down again, and he took off, and we were catching hell the whole time from shore. We weren't as smart as we thought. Well, we got all that water on, the ship settled down, and it had settled down into the sand. Little did we know that when we pulled back out again and started back towards the States, we were going to Panama to get back to New York. Instead of that, we lost a blade off of the propeller. It broke off. So we were doing about 5 knots an hour, and you couldn't even walk on it. It was just like being on it just jumped up and down like that, back and forth. And we had to pull into San Diego and south of Wilmington, and they had to put a new propeller on. And when I did that, the whole damn crew decided they didn't like it no more. You've been out longer. We would have been gone for 6 months at that time. Mm-hmm. So they let most of the crew left. Mm-hmm. So I had to get a new crew on and bring it back through Panama again and up to New York. But talking about being in New York, on that first ship I brought into New York, and we got loaded and was pulling back out. We got his pilot on and was pulling out to meet the convoy. And when we did, it was foggy. I'll give him credit for that. And the next thing we knew, there's another ship coming right at us. And we sideswiped each other, took all the lifeboats off of one side of the ship, broke the davits off, tore up the gunnels, the whole works, so all the way down and cracked the side of the ship. they only had like a half-inch steel plates on them. Yeah. So we pulled out, got out of the thoroughfare there, dropped anchor, and sat there and waited for further orders. They said, okay, you can come in now and go into the shipyard. When they did, we pulled up the anchor, and we had all these wires, big wires on the thing. And when we pulled it up, they all broke off. Found out that they were the telephone wires going from Brooklyn to Hoffman Island to Staten Island. And we broke it, and all the lights went out in Staten Island. No telephone service, no nothing. We pulled on in and got fixed up and caught hell from you wouldn't know who all, It screwed them all up for the whole convoy that was leaving next. So we had to wait, I think it was another 10 days before the convoy reformed so we could get back out again and get that. So that was an experience, getting out of there. Yeah. So, well, not cutting down again. Can you stop it again? My ears are. So after the hurricane in Naha, on the way back, getting a new propeller and pulling in there and getting a new it on, getting a new crew, going through the canal, coming back to New York again, and then getting refitted again up in there. And then making our trips. By that time, they were putting on, the war was, that was the end of the war then when we come back to that. That's what it just, I think that was like in August or September or whatever it was. And then we went from there to, in there, then we started taking locomotives and that to France, southern France, and picking up prisoners from Africa, taking them over to Italy, and then they picked them up on transports and bring them back to wherever they were going to, Mm-hmm. And then that become a regular trip then. It was still, in the harbors over there, that you still had your, the ship that was ahead of us hit an old mine that was in there, and we had to get out of there. And we made trips over there, I guess, for almost a year, and then found out that the French didn't like those big diesel engines that we took over. They were big, monstrous things. So we had to pick them up and exchange them for steam locomotives. So we were back and forth on that. And after that, then we make trips up to Bremerhaven. And that's the mines, the river, the Weser River was all mined. And we went with the old George Washington, and she was just ahead of us again, coming back out. And they figured she could break the ice coming out because it was about almost 2 feet thick in that river. So she come out, and I guess she was drawing more water because she was used to be a big German ocean liner. Mm-hmm. And coming back out again, she run over a mine, hit a mine in the river, and it blew one of the propellers off and cracked the underneath. But she had a nickel-plated hull on her. So they took her back in and fixed her, and then we had to come out by ourselves. Coming back out, then through this ice, just breaking through it, and this captain wasn't using too much good sense anyway. He just ramming the ice and coming out until they got the salt water out there. And we come back, and on the way back, I was up on the deck, checking the deck and checking things out, and there was a crack across the deck. And we went down and looked at it and couldn't figure out how the hell that happened, you know. And then we looked around for more of them, and then there was a crack in the housing on the aft end. And on our way back in, we couldn't make good time. We were way slow, about 5 knots slower than what we were. Come back in to go into the shipyard, and on a ship you got rolling chocks, what they call it. Great big 18, 24-inch I-beams that go the length of the ship just below the water line. And that keeps it, when you're rolling like that, it helps keep it. And when we tried to get into the dry dock, we couldn't. They sent divers down and found out that these rolling chocks were rolled back like that, you know, it looked like we had wings on it. We couldn't even get into our dock. Yeah, they had to cut them off first before got it. Going through that ice, got a hold of them chocks and tore them loose.
Oh,
And there, and it also cracked the deck up above, you know. So what you missed during the war, you're picking up doing the other. And I don't know what some of the other things like. Well, see, after the war, see, that's where I get mixed up where I've been and during the war and after the war. Yeah. So we went in some, most of the time it was in England, and you were under attack almost all the time you were in England. You know, air attacks. And we got hit a couple of times with that. I got fire bombs, you know, these incendiary bombs, and they'd burn right down through the deck. So we found out that the way that the British were doing it, they'd go, if one of them hit on a roof, they'd take a pail of sand and went down underneath it and caught it in this pan. So that's what I did. I had to get some wash tubs full of sand, and when one of them had burned to the deck, we'd run down there with this damn thing and catch down there, so it didn't go all the way down. It would just keep right on burning. They were magnesium, and you just can't put them out. The only way they could get out is they had to smother themselves out, and the sand formed a glass coating around them. So that's how we stopped that. And then if you were making trips down out past Land's End, coming like from the Irish Sea, going out into the English Channel, you had to get through that narrow passage there between those islands at Land's End and the very tip of England, where they had you boxed in right there. When you come through that, all they had to do is come over that area, and they had you. So we got hit several times coming across there, and most of the time it was like small things. All we were worried about was submarines sitting out there. So we had shrapnel from England and our own guns going up and down. And I had a piece of shrapnel I kept hooked up onto the wall in my quarters there. And it was, I guess, 2.5 feet by 8 inches wide, you know, and that inch thick, where it come right through, down through the roof of my cabin, right down there and stuck right into the flooring, the deck, right alongside of my bunk, you know. So that was close enough right there. And twice we were out there and had tied up to the docks in Liverpool or one of them, and had under those attack. That's where I got shrapnel in the back on that. And another time when we were coming through around Ireland going into the North Sea. We were bombed coming out of there. And I got it, that's where I got this scar here on my jaw. And but the one good thing about that was this doctor we had on the ship was a plastic surgeon in civilian life. He looked and sang just like Perry Como. I don't want to remember his name, but I just wonder if he ever went into singing again after that, because he had a beautiful voice. You know. Anyhow, he practiced on me different new techniques that he was working on, and he gave me like I had a big scar here under my eye from another time, and then this scar here, and that went all the way into my jaw. It took these teeth out here, yeah, and he fixed up my the jaw, its gums and that, and then fixed this up. This laid way over. It was really ugly, you know, and he cleaned it up real good. And then the ones under my eyes is when they were just starting this business with the abrasive, and I'd go up there every so often, and he'd whittle that down with this abrasive stuff until he had it pretty well. You can't even tell it now. It's pretty well gone. And I got a piece of metal in the back of my head, and that in the back. I think they got most of that out. I think there's one piece still in the back. And then my shoulder, when we were in Cherbourg, we come under attack about the third time over there. And somebody later on says, well, Cherbourg wasn't under attack. I said, I can prove it because my shoulder is still lopsided where I was blown off of those, the port side over to the starboard side, or the force of the concussion coming up on that. So when I hit on this shoulder, and they took me to shore and fixed that up. I didn't break any bones, it just tore everything loose, all the ligaments and all that. And it was really painful for a long time. In fact, for 20 years it was painful, you know. And they took me back and put me in a hospital, I think it was in Southampton, England. And put me in like a straitjacket till there was ligaments got thrown back together again and all that. In the meantime, I went back to the ship. Since I was a boatswain, I didn't really have to do any of that work. Just tell them how to do the work, you know. And on that, talking about taking equipment on and off with this big boom. This was the biggest floating boom that they had at that time, biggest ship boom they had. And I had 4 different winches to pick this thing up, these locomotives or whatever they were. And I could take them from the inside of the ship, and it had each guy wire, and on each side of your main boom had the purchase and the boom and the 2 on the side to pick it up. That's what happened to the Texas. They didn't switch them, and when they went over the side, the whole thing fell over. And you want to shut that off again? I think I'm getting off of what. Well, after the fighting stopped, and we hauled those locomotives back and forth to France and some to Italy and stuff like that, bringing prisoners back. Then after that, then there was just a steady run by the transports to bring troops back from Germany and them places and bring them back to the United States. Sometimes we took them over and rotated them and brought them back. But then we'd say take over new troops, then we brought down DPs or displaced persons back with us to the States. And either we brought them into New York, that was our bunch that we were supposed to get, or we'd take them into Canada. And then after that, we'd take them to Australia, and that was, they got the cream of the crop down there. They get the doctors, nurses, and things like that. And if it wasn't going to there, then we'd go down like to Argentina, and they got, because the Germans, before the war, all took off and went to Argentina. When you go down there, and the first time I was in Argentina, and you go to a big restaurant or a show or something like that, and you sit there and there sits a bunch of big blonde Dutchmen, look like Dutchmen, heavy, big, heavy guys, and they're speaking Spanish. What the hell's going on here? That was the Germans that fled, Hitler and that. You find out later on, So after the war, then a lot of those knew where they were going because they had relatives down in Argentina and Uruguay and other places. So we'd take those down to there. And then we took, a bunch of them, from the ones that we would pick up like in Trieste, down in Italy, and over from Italy, Naples, Genoa, and then over into Greece, every different place like that, where they had an accumulation of these people that flooded in after the war looking for a haven, someplace to go to. And they were overrun, they couldn't take care of them. So we were picking them up and dispersing them all over the world. And we'd go from Bremerhaven, pick up a bunch of them up there, and I got a thing here for that, and pick them up and go down to Panama, through Panama, and down to Peru, down the name of it, the port for Lima. And then we go drop half of them off there, and then go down to Valparaiso, Chile, and drop them off there. And then come back up again and either go back to Bremerhaven or one of the southern European ports, Marseille, Naples, or someplace like that. Pick up another load of them, take them down to Brazil, Rio, and Venezuela, and all these different places. Took some of them even into Mexico. They took very, very few of them went into there. And we go into Australia, and sometimes they would want you to take maybe somebody back. So we used to make the complete circle of the world in. We'd go from Australia, and then back up through the Red Sea and into Palestine, Greece or like that, and pick up another load then in Naples, and then take them back, either back down this way. We took a bunch of them down to South Africa, down to Durban, and Johannesburg is where they all wound up down there. And a lot of those were Germans that we took down to that. But most of the Latins, like Italians and southern France and stuff like that, the ones with the Romantic languages, they all went to South America. And we took them all over the place. We took this one bunch over, they didn't have nothing. I mean, they were the poorest bunch we ever took. And we took them, I think we picked them up in Trieste and took them to Venezuela and down to Portobello. Now, Portobello at that time, I think it's a pretty good sized town now, but at that time it was one little pier sticking straight out into the ocean. Portobello means by the hair. It was so quiet and calm that you could tie a ship up with a hair. That's what the Spanish called it. Anyhow, all the way over, we'd have those people working as cooks and whatever they could do, sweeping the decks down, stuff like that. And I think it was on that ship, no, because we didn't go through the canal. We dropped them off, and he was telling us what these people told him that they were going to get into. Most of them were farmers and stuff like that, from Yugoslavia, Hungary, places like that, you know. And we pulled in down there, and the jungle comes right down to the ocean.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you can't see nothing but trees right down into the ocean. And when we dropped them off, we couldn't even pull all the way up. We pulled up to the end of this long dock, and they got off and walked up. And if you ever see the disappointment in their faces, they were figuring great big grassy farmland, you know. They knew that Venezuela wasn't heavily populated, and you were away from the main cities and that. And so they figured they were going to go down there, lay out farms and the whole works, you know. And they get down there and there's just nothing but jungle that they were getting off. Whatever happened to them, you know, or if they cleaned out the jungle and made homes for themselves out of it, I don't know. But I said, boy, wait until you see what you're going to get into, you know. And you get those people on there, and the first trip I think we made to Peru or one of them, we had a bunch like that again, and we pulled into Panama and Balboa, and when we pulled in there, Cristobal, it's on this end of the canal, and these bum boats come out. So they want to sell you everything, jewelry, furniture, anything that you could think of. So this bosun's mate that I had threw over a line and threw $1 down and got a whole stalk of bananas, a great big stalk. I mean, it was enormous. Took 2 of them to pull it back up. And he took it over, and my cabin was right here and there was an overhang for your next deck. And he took a line and tied it up there. And I said, what are you going to do, pass them out? He said, yeah. He says, oh, well, just let them go. He says, come on. And I said, no, don't do that. I hollered, I screamed out. And it was too late. As soon as he said, come on, they all rushed those bananas. And I mean, they trampled little kids. They broke arms. They did every goddamn thing. Each trying to get, they hadn't had a banana.
Yeah.
Christ, maybe some of them never did have a banana. But I knew what would happen because I had seen it once before, where if you put something down and say, okay, you can have it, they'll kill each other to get to it. They don't give a damn about kids or anything else. There was nothing but mush on the decks, you know, after that. And I raised hell, you know, made them get shovels, shovel all that stuff up, wash the whole deck down, the whole works. And I said, now we'll be pulling into another port up above when we leave. And then you can pick these up. We'll pick you up a bunch of bananas. If that's what you want, we'll get bananas. We'll put them on here. But you'll pass them out and you'll act like human beings. Well, from then on they did, you know. But they go down and eat. And each one of them got a half a loaf of bread a day. And they'd go down there and get it and then steal the other guys. And you look at them and you'd see them standing there like that. They'd have a half a piece of bread over on this side, maybe something a potato or something stuck over here, and they carried that stuff around underneath their clothes. You know, like they didn't, just better eat it now because you're not going to get any more. You know, just. So anyhow, we've made those trips back and forth for, I don't know how many years we did that. And then, like, bringing troops back and forth. And then after that, that's when the Korean War started.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into that. Now, I was on the General Black, I think it was, at that time. And we come through the canal. Yeah, we were dropping off DPs someplace down on the west coast of South America, and they called us to come up. The Korean War had just started, or just going to start, they knew it. And we pulled up and we went all the way up into Seattle, and they put us into the dock there at Fort Lewis. And while we were there, they come in with another big transport, and it had all these troops on it. And they took them all off of that transport, marched them around the end of that dock and right back and right up on our ship. And we picked them up and took them back to Korea. They just come in from, their stint was over in Japan. And they come back and got off ours. And they say, where are you taking us? Down to San Francisco? That's where I want to go, San Francisco. I want to go to California. And they're going on. I says, boy, you don't know what's going on, you know. We pulled out of there and headed on out, and they didn't tell them until about the second day or so out where they were going. I thought we were going to have a riot on our hands, you know. They were really teed off. They'd been over there for, well, their whole enlistment, I guess, had been over in Japan and then come back. So we took them over there, and instead of going to Japan, which they thought, we went on around into Busan over in Korea. And that was just as the Gooks were coming down and trying to take the south end. They were all the way down because we would come out and pull out a port, and you could see all the firing and everything was still going on right there. And when we dropped the troops off is when they started pushing them back. And it gives the Marines a break on that. When the Army troops come out to give them a hand and push them back up to the line up there.
Right.
Well, instead of stopping there, that's when they went all the way up then. And then that's when we come back out around there, come back, and made a couple of trips. We were making trips, we were making trips in between Japan and Korea, bringing troops, fresh troops over, back and forth, you know. So all this while they're going up, and we come back to the States, and they said they wanted to get the UN involved in this war. You know, that was when they were first going to do their thing. So they took us then and sent us from New York, and we went to first up into the Baltic, and we picked up like Danish troops and not the troops out of the Baltic, and we went down to Holland, down to Rotterdam, and picked up another bunch of French and the Dutch troops. And left from there, went down to Marseille and picked up French troops, over to Athens, Greece, picked up Greek troops, crossed the Bosphorus and went over to the Turkish troops. They picked up 1,000 or some Turkish troops, went down the Mediterranean, and they had some Jewish and what else was in there. Picked them up, went through the Suez Canal over to stopped off at go back we picked up food, and that because we had food for Americans, and there's ones that we picked up were Islamic or what they were, and they wouldn't eat it. They wouldn't even cook out of the same pots or nothing else. The Greeks was all right, but when we picked up the Turks, then they refused to do anything. And this guy on there insisted that we pull in someplace to get that straightened out. And so then we had to pick up copper pots and pans and all new meat. And they brought an English guy on, a little bitty withered up thing that had spent his whole life in the Near East, you know. And they come on with all this carcasses of sheep, you know, sheep and mutton and that's the only meat that they'd eat. And they come on and he says, I want a chair down here, right here. And just right where the gangway started up, you know. And he says, put me a chair right there. And I said, who the hell are you? You know. But got him a chair and he put it down there and he would just sit back there and watch as they went up by. And every once in a while he kicked one of them like that. And I said, what the hell are you doing? He says, that was a dog instead of a sheep. He could tell the difference. I couldn't. I didn't know one thing from a neck. But he could tell a dog from a sheep. And when he found one, he kicked him, knocked him out of line, and then let the line continue on up. But these vendors down there are trying to get away with something, you know, just throw in a couple of dogs, you know. Anyhow, we went from there down to, it was in Malaysia, where in the hell was it? Anyhow, we wound up in Bangor, not Bangor.
Bangkok?
No. In Malaysia there, and picked up Malaysian troops. There's a big town there. I can't even think of it. Anyhow, come back around and made another stop there. I guess it's what's Vietnam now. I mean, down at what they fought for that time.
Yeah.
Anyhow, we wound up, and we had an anchor, not anchor out, but we worked around out there for, I guess, a week. And in the meantime, his Turkish troops were getting a little rowdy. And this guy that was in charge of them was a prince over in Turkey. But he was also the foremost artilleryman in the world. That's what they told us. And he didn't take no lip from nobody. He just threw him in jail. We had a big thing down below that we made into a jail. And he'd throw them all in down there. And I think he had 20 of them in down there. And he come down, he wanted me to give him some chain, and he was going to throw them over the side. And I said, you can't do it, you know. So that was a big argument that just showed what their mindset and what the way they thought, you know. Anyhow, when they made the landings in Incheon, then we come in with them. We followed the Marines and the troops in on that and dumped these mostly Turkish troops off there, and the Greeks and the rest of them. And they fought with the Americans on up into the border of China, remember, and then China come in on it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we made a couple of trips by that time. We made another trip or two over. Then when we come back, they said we had to go to Wonsan, which is up in the other side of Korea, all the way up to Bunt. That's when the Chinese come in and chased the Americans away from that Cheson Reservoir, and they were being pushed back. We pulled in up there to pick up the troops to take them out and take them back down to Pusan. While we were sitting there waiting for it, this major come on and had a recoilless rifle and put it up on the bow of our ship and I set it up there on a hatch cover, and it had a small barge of shells, and asked us if we would shoot these shells up into this cut in these mountains, because that's where the Chinese and that were coming through. If we would just lay down patterns of shells, just keep them going up there until these troops all got away from up there. The troops were through, but they wanted to keep the Chinese away until we got loaded up and could get out of there. So we fired those things. My arms were so damn tired of putting shells into that thing, yeah. Anyhow, as soon as that, we got all the troops back on, and we followed a minesweeper out. Now, they said that there was 2,500 mines in one Son Harbor alone, and trying to get out of that thing, you know. Anyhow, we followed this minesweeper out, and we got clear of it, and come down and got into Pusan and dumped the troops off. We picked up other troops to bring back to the States, and on the way back, going from Pusan to the States, there was another hurricane, and right in the middle of it, our propellers, something happened. They wasn't functioning. What happened, they said, is that somewhere or another they got a reverse in the propeller, and it tore the blades off of the steam turbine. That's what they told us. I didn't know. I'm not an engine man. I don't know. Anyhow, there we sat in the middle of this damn hurricane, and I'm trying to rig up tarpaulins, big tarpaulins that hang all the way from the mainmast all the way down to keep us so we could stay straight into the wind, you know. And then we threw another big tarpaulin off with hatch covers in it to make like a sea anchor to keep us into the wind. And while we're sitting there, there's mines in that place up the kazoo, and they had these sharpshooters up there shooting at these mines and blowing up these mines or sinking them, getting water into them so that they sank, and they didn't hit us, you know, while we're sitting there, can't get out of their way. So they blew up 2 or 3 of them and sunk I don't know how many other ones. But this hurricane had broke them loose from the waters around Japan and the rest of it. And after the war, they had a hell of a time with that. From that, then we've come on back to the States. And I don't know how many trips I made back over, but that was about it. And then I don't know where my last trip was, too. I don't know if my last trip was going to Korea and back or what. But I quit in the last of 51. I got home in 52. And I never went back. That was it, you know. Like Gene was saying, and you never say this is my last trip because you never come back from it, you know. It's always, I had one guy told me that, and I know it's true, that he was going to get off after this trip. We were going to Greece, and he was coming back, and when we got there, we opened up the hatch cover, and when we did, one of the hatch covers flipped up and come down and hit him on the head and killed him.
Oh, you kidding?
His wife was waiting for him back there, and I mean his wife to be. So from then on, I said, I'm not taking any chances. I'm not going to say this is going to be my last trip. Now I understand why they say it, you know. But that was another thing. After the war, then I was on the Golden Eagle, and I made about 6 or 8 trips on that. We used to go from New York up through the Cape Cod Canal up to Maine, Searsport, Maine. And they had a railroad spur there, and that was it, nothing else there. And they brought carloads of potatoes down in boxes, just boxes of potatoes. And we'd take up to 10,000 tons of potatoes over to the troops and that and make the trips through North Africa, Greece, and all these other places and back again. Yeah. And so it was take potatoes, or one time we'd take meat, because this was a refrigerator ship, and we could take them over and back, And all the trips to Bremerhaven, Marseille, and then going down to South America back and forth, Australia. So it was just all over the joint, So, so I don't know where, there's other things, but I can't think of them right now. I just,
Right. That
so,
was very informative.
huh?
Was-
I don't know how informative it is, but a lot of it, the interest in the part of it was unloading these big, heavy equipment,
Yeah.
and knowing that you were doing something that nobody else could do. And you were, in my case, I was in charge of it, so that was a little bit more of a kick up, and that. And pulled into Marseille one time after all this was going on, and I was a wreck. We just come back from Korea, that's what it was. Pulled into Marseille and had these engines on, and the mate and I are standing alongside the hatch arguing about something. And it was the day before New Year's. And I guess we were arguing about, can some of the men get off for New Year's, or can they all get off? Can we get a crew from someplace else to come over and stand guard, or whatever? And we got into a fist fight, and we got an area of about a foot that we can stay in. And if either one of us would have fell over, we'd have been 76 feet down to the bottom of that deck, to a concrete floor. And about that time, the old man come up and grabbed both of us and pulled us over and says, no more of this. Both of you go ashore and get it out of your system. I come back 10 days later, and so did the mate. He come back about a half hour before I did. But I noticed all the time that I was gone, I had somebody from the crew, I always run into one. I don't know if they were following me, they were keeping track of me, or what they were doing, making sure that I wasn't, but I think I was higher than a kite the whole 10 days I was gone, So I come back, he come back, I come back and went up to report to her. And when I got up to his room, I heard the captain in there eating his butt out, up and down, really giving him hell. And he turned around and see me at the door, and he grabbed me and pulled me in. And he says, now this goes for you too. And we both got our ass eat real good going about what we did and where we should have been. And he had to take over the ship while we were gone. He had to be the mate and the bosun and the whole works, put them into work, get them out. And he says, I don't appreciate it being captain of the ship and have to do this kind of work. And then that's where I found out, when you got hot pipes from drinking too much, he went and got a bottle of bitters and gave both of us a big spoonful of bitters. And he says, that'll straighten you out. And after you get straightened out, I want you back out on deck and working, And it did straighten me out. I never thought it would. Just taking straight bitters would do that. But he straightened it out anyway,
That's good.
So, and that we had guys get off a ship and get married, come back, down in Greece. This guy down there we had on the ship, one of the worst seamen I ever had, but he got off to get married to this Greek girl. And they said this Greek girl had 10 pounds of gold, that she was really a hooker in this big beer joint down there. And everybody was thinking it was British pounds,
Yeah.
It was 10 pounds of gold is what she had. And she wanted to get to the States, so that she had to marry him to get back up there, So that went on. And another one got off in Bologna, Italy, to get married. We never did see him again. I don't know where he was. So, just different things, you know. So, I don't know what else I can put on right now, so.
Okay, that sounds great.
You want to turn it off
Thank you
again?
very much.
That enough?
Oh, yeah, anything you feel comfortable with, but thanks a lot.